I want to explore the flight search experience on flight booking sites. Today I'm going to do it only on two websites, which is Skyscanner and booking.com. And the main motive here is to understand how accessible these websites are for a global audience. If I see flight booking sites today, I can imagine that every flight booking site has somewhat similar experience. There could be some slight differences in the user experience that you see in these flight booking sites. Well, typically when a customer is trying to book a flight, all you need to do is enter the origin and the destination. So how easy it is to find your origin city and the destination city. And selection of date, how easy it is to select the date that you want to travel. For this exploration, I'm going to look at three main things. First is how accessible the website is for me in terms of the language, how accessible it is in terms of my currency, and how easy it is to use when it comes to the actual search of the flight. So what you see here is a Skyscanner's homepage. I stay in Amsterdam, but I'm originally from India. So my main language of communication between these two countries is English. So I would prefer this website to be English. The natural way to is, of course, have Google Translate do it for you. But this is where I feel Skyscanner does a brilliant job. They have an option to switch to English immediately after they know that this person is trying to do something here. So this is like a quick access to a language which they assume is probably most global audiences aware of. Now, when I switch to English, all my field names change to English and the whole communication is now in English. So it makes it easier on the rest of the task that I'm about to do. So I'll hit save on this one. And when I do this, the whole website changes. I can see that it has all become English, and I can go ahead and do rest of my tasks on the screen. The next website that I'm looking for is booking.com. And on this page, if you just see this page, I can see that there is this icon which allows me to change the language. Now, because it is defaulting to English for some reason, I will keep it as English. Now, if you notice, I am not a signed in user. There is a difference in the signed in user experience versus non signed in users. So, for signed in user, because I use booking.com quite often, I can set up my preference for currency and I have set it up as euro. So, when a non signed up user comes in, I wanted to see what the experience looks like. So, at this point, at least, I do not have a choice to input my currency. I do not know where else can I do it. So, let me just quickly go here on the screen and no. So it seems like I have to stay with English as my preference. I'm back to Skyscanner. The next thing logically you would do is enter your source, which is your origin, and enter your destination, and then select dates and other factors. Here I'm going to Lisbon, right? I'll just type Lisbon. And the best thing that this user experience is doing right now, I'm going to move myself for a while, is that it gives me an option apart from Lisbon. So that's something that it's easy to do. I can also search with just Portugal. So if I do not know the exact name of the airport or the city I want to visit, I can just do Portugal as well. So this is already enhancing my experience where I do not have to know the actual city airport name, the actual city name. I can just go to the country and see which airports are there. And I think this is really a good user experience when you're trying to enter the city. So here, let me just enter Amsterdam and I will say Amsterdam Schiphol. And then here I want to say London. Now this is where it gets interesting. So despite having one city, it doesn't have just one airport. It will have multiple airports. And it gives me an options from which airport do you want to go. I'm just going to select Heathrow as the default one here. The next thing I want to check is how does it make it easy for me to select the date. And date has been a very, very confusing UI element for me. It is sometimes very easy, sometimes very difficult. You will especially notice this when you're filling up date in any of the forms, which are like application forms. And you may have like three different parts. So you have to select the day, the month, and the year. That's one way of taking in date. Sometimes you're just asked to input it, but in certain format. Sometimes you get something called as date picker, which is a very common element in the world of UI. So this is typically a date picker. Now, date pickers can come with the front end technology that you use as a template. So you can have a default date picker. You can also customize it. Now, I am somewhat confident, I'm not very confident, that Skyscanner is probably using their own custom date picker here because they have multiple components to be looked at. For example, within the date picker, they've already highlighted by the way of color coding which flight is going to be cheaper. So you cannot achieve this if you're doing a default one. That's my assumption. But just as a user, for me to be able to select the departure date is where I come here. Now, let's say I want to go from 1st February. So once I select this, it automatically fills up here. This instant gratification of the action that I just took is very important in the web products. So when you are on the websites or even mobile applications, when you're selecting something, if you do not see instant feedback of that action, you're going to get a little bit confused. Now, what has happened here, and you must have noticed this, that immediately after selecting my first departure date, I am moved to the next block, which is this return date. And now I have to select my return date. So let's say I want to return on, say, 5th of March, right? So it's back to the highlighting part. This is important. It's back to 1st February. So I think I can change. So I can say probably 3rd February. Now it's back to the returns field. And then I can say 6th March. Here I have one way and return. This is the place they're asking me, when do you want to return, or is this just one way? Now, I'll say this is it. I have a direct action to search. Because they have taken my preference for euro, I am seeing the rates in euro. The site is still in English, so it has adhered to my preference. For this video, I'm not going to compare how the search results are working. Is it giving me the best result, and what kind of UI elements are used here? I do not want to evaluate that for this one. If I want to compare this experience with booking.com, as you can see, the option to make it a round trip, one way, multi-city, whether you want round trip or one way, is right at the top here compared to the Skyscanner, which was within the date thing. It's kind of counterintuitive. So most of the times you would expect it outside, whereas in Skyscanner you see it inside. So that's something that's very interesting. Let's see how easy it is to search for cities. Now, if I want Lisbon, yeah, there is the difference in the experience, which is if I type Lisbon, I get one option and I select that option. And I have to come out of this by clicking outside the screen. If you want to compare this experience with here, if I want to type Lisbon, as you can see, it's giving me 2, 3 options. Now, it is totally up to the use case of the customer on whether this UI is useful or not. If you type Lisbon, do you want to know Portimao and do you want to know Cascais as an option, right? So that's debatable. Why are they showing rest of the options? But this is an interesting thing. But I did find what I wanted. And then let's say you want to go from Lisbon to Barcelona. So it allows me to search with city name. Let me see if it allows me to search with code. Yes. One thing I notice here is that it allows me a checklist option. So I'm able to select multiple cities in this UI itself. Let me check if I was able to do that. I cannot do that. I have to do single city here. I go to my default search, which is I want to go from Amsterdam to London. And let's say Heathrow. Now I want to look at how easy it is to select the dates. Let's say if I want to go from 1st February, right? And now whatever I select, it's telling me that you're selecting the range. So I can select, let's say 18th February. Kind of easy. There is no indication of prices being cheaper or expensive just in the date element. I also do not see other options that I see typically in Skyscanner, which is whether you want flexible date. So that feature is not there in the date element. And I think I would probably have to do some other filter somewhere, but I don't see that option. And it's different in the sense that you get this whole big block, right? It's similar to this one, but it looks a bit bigger. It takes up more screen space, of course. And then you select this rate, and then you want to, I'm not sure. So I have to select this location so that I can see proper rates. Date selector seems to be much more feature enriched compared to booking.com, and so I can see the difference right away. I like the added information that Skyscanner chooses to provide when you select the dates, whereas in booking.com I get a vanilla date selection, right? And then when you click on search, it moves on to the next screen, and which I would say is pretty standard. One thing I'm curious about on this page is how do I see the rates, which to my surprise is in euros. If I were to sum this up, I think having the option to choose the currency and your preferred language at the beginning of your search is definitely helpful. So it is very accessible to the global audience. It does not restrict you to watch the content or see the content in certain currency, certain language. So that's definitely a very good point when you're designing products. Secondly, I like the additional features that are part of these search elements. So, for example, when I'm searching for a city, I do not get just one city as an option. The date selection feature was the interesting one. Typically, a date selection feature would be expected to work like what Booking is doing. You select a date, and that's that. There is nothing more that you will find in this date element. I think Skyscanner has spent a lot of time in researching what the users need. It's very clear in terms of how they have portrayed it. I really love the experience of allowing to choose the language and not assuming the language based on the country. Such experience for the cities or the airports is very different in both Skyscanner and booking.com. I did not have a specific difficulty in finding the origin city and the destination city. Both of them offered the similar kind of experience. My overall impressions are I definitely like Skyscanner experience over booking.com. Booking.com can have some improvements in their flight search experience. Let me know if you have a preferred flight booking site which is much better than these two, something that works out for you well. I would love to explore more sites as well and see how their product experiences are. That's it for this video.